Well, welcome everybody to this panel. The panel today that we're going to be discussing and talking about is Mind to Body, Normalizing Mental Health in Sports. It's really part of Wondermind's very first mental fitness summit, which is really exciting that we're endeavoring upon this kind of first process. I'm Dr. Yeager, and this session that you'll be part of today is in partnership with Powerade. So you hear us talk about that throughout the conversation. But in this session specifically, we're going to hear from some big names in sports, especially Olympic sports, and mental health and mental wellness. We're going to talk about a lot of the convergence of the two and overcoming challenges. And as part of the power of the pause message that Powerade is really talking about and engaging with, as well as Wondermind. We're going to speak about the moment of embracing the pause. I think this is a really important concept that we all should be engaging with and understanding more. And we'll talk about more of that as we go. And we live in a society that really kind of talks about win at all costs. And when we talk about athletes understand that more deeply than most. And Powerade is challenging us in this belief of the pause is power mantra. It highlights the brand's belief that true power lies not just in relentless pursuit, but in the ability to be human and listen to yourself when you need a pause. And we all need that pause, probably more often than we'll say or than we'll give credit. We need a moment of reflection and really a recovery or community connection. One of the things that we'll talk a lot about that will be the backdrop for this discussion is we seek to contextualize human beings and kind of that human nature. I think one of the struggles that we have as human beings is that we don't move to contextualize one another enough. We decontextualize. If we have context, it kind of muddies the water. So this conversation will really be about contextualizing each other, especially around the idea of mental health. So without further ado, let's get into this discussion. I'm going to just quickly and briefly introduce each. We have Emma Twigg with us this morning that will be part of this discussion. Harrie Lavreysen will be part of this, and as well, Mandy Teefey. As I said, my name is Dr. Yeager. I'll have each of them speak a little bit more in detail about who they are and kind of their journey. But the very first thing I want to talk about and get into this morning is about adversity. And all of us as human beings deal with adversity all the time. It's always moving. We're always dealing with it. And one of the things that I think that we must understand is that adversity, more often than not, is an opportunity for us to learn, right? Any adversity that we go through is really going to be an opportunity for us to engage, slow things down, and learn from the struggle. So Emma, I want to start with you. And I'll start off by saying you've had a really unique and circuitous route and journey in your athletic endeavors and the work that you do. And I want to talk about your athletic experience and adversity that you've had or dealt with, from taking a break away from your chosen sport to figure out your academic studies to an early retirement after the 2016 Olympics, and then a comeback. So I want to know a little bit more, Emma. Talk to us about how that adversity, any of those adversities that I just touched on or any other ones, how did you learn from them? What did they teach you as you went through your journey? Tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure to be here. I have had a kind of long and winding career. I guess it's transpired over almost 2 decades. So there's been many times where I've kind of stopped and paused for different reasons. My sport is rowing, and so this last Olympics in Paris was my 5th games. But after my 3rd Olympics, I was actually 4th at the Rio Games and was 4th at the London Games as well. So 2 4th places, which in sport is fairly brutal, some would say. And that really kind of spurred a moment in me that perhaps I wasn't going to be an Olympic champion, and it wasn't necessarily, where I would end up, and that I needed to take a break and step away from the sport. And it was that moment of adversity and yeah, I guess self-reflection in that year off that I realised that actually sport was more about the daily processes and enjoying the day to day, as opposed to necessarily hanging everything on a medal that may or may not eventuate. So I think that moment of pause and that reflection of not necessarily achieving my goals has really added longevity to my career, and has certainly in that 4 year period after Rio obviously led to me becoming an Olympic champion in Tokyo. And I think a lot of that was just that mental freedom, and taking away some of the pressures around what success actually was.
Yeah. So, I mean, you said a word that I think is really important. You talked about reflection, and it's really that's kind of connected to that power of the pause. So, how do you reflect? Do you reflect in the midst of your process? So you're getting ready for Olympics. You're in rowing. You went to 5 different Olympics. Is reflection something that only occurs after the moment? All right, now everything is done, and now you reflect back. Are there built-in opportunities for you to reflect as you're training or moving in towards that journey? How does that reflection thing work for you? That's tough, by the way.
Yeah, I think reflection is very much a part of what we do as elite athletes daily. We're constantly reflecting or analysing and thinking about the last session and how things can be better. I think you can think of it from a really big perspective in terms of quite a long-term goal, or just going through your daily kind of exercises. But I think reflection is learning, right? And that was the key to my success after not having success, is really kind of honestly reflecting on what went well and what didn't go well, and learning from those things, and putting in some strategies around me, some people around me that would allow me to eventually be successful.
Yeah, I love that idea of reflection as learning. I think it's really important. So, Harrie, I want to tap into you. So, just so people have a bit of a frame of you. So, you had a number of injuries, so a number of shoulder injuries. You were at the top of the sport in terms of BMX from a young age, but at 18, you made a transition, a move from BMX to cycling. So talk to us about the adversity that you dealt with, right, as that transition occurred. The adversity that you faced, what did it teach you, right? Injuries, recovering from injuries, all of these things. Tell us a little bit about that adversity you faced and what it taught you about yourself, Harrie.
Yes, it taught me a lot of stuff. I started BMX racing when I was already 6 years old, like a really young age, and I kept doing that. Became first time Dutch champion when I was 12, then European champion when I was 14, 15, 16. But then when I was 16, I also got a lot of shoulder injuries. I dislocated my right shoulder a lot of times, and like 25 times. I got 2 surgeries on my right shoulder. But then a year later, I crashed again with BMX and I dislocated both shoulders at the same time. That was the moment I needed to stop BMX racing. I still wanted to keep going because I had an Olympic dream. But I needed to stop. The doctor told me, like, you need surgery on both shoulders again, and then you're not going to do BMX anymore. So when I stopped BMX, I immediately started doing track cycling. I was living on a sports center where I could switch sports. Not easy, but they gave me the chance, and I had surgery on both shoulders again. But after that, track cycling went on really well. Went to the Tokyo Olympics, where I won 2 gold medals and a bronze. And then, like a month ago in Paris, I won 3 gold medals. So what I learned from it, I'm really happy with the switch. But back then, like for 2 years struggling with the injuries, but still wanted to continue. I think I learned a lot. What I think I kept keeping the dream of going to the Olympics, and I'm really happy I kept the dream.
So, Harrie, tell us a little bit about this, though. as you went through all of that adversity and you were dealing with all of that and the transition from BMX to cycling, all of these things, these transitions and this adversity, how did that impact your mental health or your mental wellness? Were there moments that you just said, I should give up on this? Was that never even a thought? How did the people around you, how did you guys deal with that as you went through that process?
I think for me myself, there was never a moment that thought like I wanted to stop. It was a hard time, really hard when I needed to stop racing BMX. But I think also at that moment, like people told me I needed to quit. For myself, dream was so strong. I still wanted to continue. And yeah, I think sometimes it's good to take a step back. But keep believing, in what you really want.
Yeah, we're going to keep connecting throughout this conversation to what Powerade is framed as the power of the pause. That's just that pause, that moment of reflection to say, all right, I'm going to keep going. Man, it has been a long journey, but I'm driven to continue on. But even those small pauses matter in our day-to-day existence. So I appreciate the share, Harrie. So Mandy, talk to us about, as you run Wondermind, a major organization that's really focused and honed on the mental health, mental wellness for all of us. And we're talking about this idea of adversity. So as you faced and dealt with adversity in the business climate and kind of the world that is not patient, how have you individually, personally, Mandy, dealt with adversity and recovered from it? And how has the organization done the same kind of as you move through this world?
Yeah, I think it's when you're kind of in an environment that is going nonstop, and you have to be on top of everything in order to be where you need to be. You have to be 10 miles ahead. And so I think it's really important that you make that time and you schedule it in. You schedule it into your calendar, or when you need that moment. I always tell everyone you have to listen to your body, or, because the body will do it for you. So take the pause and rest with your body. And then, or it'll just shut down at the most inconvenient time, has happened to me. And then you are just stuck at its mercy. So, work with it, and it knows, your mind and your body knows whenever it's getting close to burnout. And so it's just committing it, and it's scary. It's very scary because, technology and everything is going 90 miles an hour, and you don't know, like, if you close your eyes for 15 minutes, what trend you're going to miss and what's going to happen, and or what phone call you missed. But just know that it's going to be there when you come back, and if not, it's already a new trend. So who cares that you missed it?
That's right. I like that.
Yeah. So it's just imperative to take care of yourself, because you can't really take care of other people. And that was really a long lesson for me when I produced a project. It took everything that we had. It was a very emotional project. And during the first and second season, right before we started the second season, I just looked at the showrunner and I said, I have to go. And I said, I have to go away and take care of myself. I have to practice what I preach. And I did. I went and I took 25 days to just completely mentally detox and physically detox. And I was at the bottom of the barrel. And had I not taken that pause, I wouldn't have been able to do anything that I really needed to do to support that project. So
Yeah. So, Mandy, you say something that I have to tap into. It's the idea of boundaries, right? So when you were in the midst of all of that and things were going really good and crazy and wild, something told you, all right, my boundaries are telling me I need time. I need 25, however many days. I think this is something we all should really engage with. It. Anybody that wants to tap into this can, nobody has to. But the idea of setting boundaries versus enforcing boundaries. So it's one thing, Mandy, to say, all right, here's my boundary. I'm not going to do this. I need to do this or that. That's almost the easy part. Enforcing the boundary when someone is pushing it and saying, hey, I'm not doing that. I need time. I need energy here or there is a different thing. And I think we all should pay attention to those two different versions. Setting your boundary, hey, that just says, hey, this is what I'm going to do and not do. Enforcing it when people push it and say, hey, but Mandy, you can't leave right now. We need you here. We need all of these things from you right now. And sticking to that is a whole different ballgame. That's a different world that I don't think as human beings we're great at. I think we can set it up, but we're not great at enforcing it. So kudos to being able to call for your space and time in the midst of all that you had going on. I give you credit because a lot of us won't do that. I'm not great at it.
I looked at it as a 25-day vacation.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. Even if I could get a 20 or a 2-day vacation sometime, it doesn't really work, but I'm moving in that direction. So great job. So I'm going to kind of go backwards, and I'm going to bring the next question to you, Harrie. And this question is really around the idea of visualization and meditation. And we're going to talk about this pause over and over and over. I see visualization, meditation as building in intentional pauses in our day-to-day approach, right? Visualizing is really just rehearsal in the mind. Many athletes that are visualizing are rehearsing what may be coming in their event or in their sport that may be coming down the line. And I think it's a really important thing. And one of the things that we want to do is build in actionable items, things that we can work on every day. And that idea of meditation and visualization is really about if we can focus on our breathing. Think about this, everyone. If you can focus on your breathing, if you pay attention to your breathing, it forces you into the current moment. It forces you. You can't be thinking about what happened 20 minutes ago, and you can't be thinking about what may happen tomorrow. And that is an important space to occupy. So if you focus on your breathing, how shallow, how deep it is, it'll force you into this moment. And I think that's the space that we should all occupy, because if we're being absolutely honest, the only true thing that we have in this life is the current moment. What happened 10 minutes ago is gone forever. What will happen in 2 days from now is yet to be seen. It's all imaginary. So what does the current moment do is what we want to occupy. So Harrie, you use visualization in your work, it sounds like, in your training regimen. And in my work with athletes, I reinforce that idea of visualization. How has this idea of visualization helped you succeed or moved you toward success, Harrie, in your day-to-day approach, in your day-to-day regimen?
Visualization is really important for me. I use it to, like, my sport is really tactical. I have like individual sprint and gearing, and the tactics are really important, and I need to study my opponents. But then also, like, a lot can happen in a few seconds on the track. So with visualization, I prepare myself for a lot of scenarios. Like I can already see the race in my head. But also I use the visualization for my tension. Like I want to have like a perfect tension going onto the track. And if I'm too relaxed, I use it to get more tension. Like when I start doing it, my heart rate will already go up. But then also when I want to have less tension, I don't want to do it and just want to talk to people or think about different stuff. This is a really important tool for myself to keep the perfect tension and perform at the right moment.
Yeah, so Harrie, that means that you're paying attention to, I like this idea of tension that you talked about, when you need more, when you need less of that, and how. And that means, it sounds like, Harrie, you figured out how to dial that tension up and down, right? And I think that's an important engagement of figuring out what works for you in dialing that up or down. So I appreciate you sharing that. Emma, I want to talk about the same thing, this idea of visualization, meditation, whatever language you may use. So just want to ask you, do you use some form of visualization or meditation? And if so, how's that been helpful for you as a major Olympian athlete?
Yeah, for sure. It's actually something that I worked on a lot pre-Tokyo, the concept of breathing, as you spoke about. And I remember lying in my bed the night before the final, and you don't get much sleep before an Olympic final, but I do remember just lying there constantly telling myself to breathe and to focus on the breathing, because that's the only thing that kind of freed my mind from everything that I was thinking about the next day. And I think that that was a really important tool. I had tendencies to kind of overthink things, or my mind would go elsewhere to perhaps my opposition, or some negative thoughts. And so that whole breathing and the concept of being present and in the moment was really helpful. And it's something that I've stayed doing for the last 4 years. And I think is actually, I find myself even going, before I do a keynote or something like that, and taking those moments and going back to those strategies and techniques that I've used in my sport.
Yeah, I think this idea, Emma, and I think it's a simple idea. This idea of tuning into your breath. People say it all the time, right? I think sometimes people get tired of hearing how simple, oh, you got to pay attention to your breathing. And when they hear it so much, I think people disregard it. It is a really important idea for us to pay attention to how we're breathing. And if we pay attention to it, it does force us into that current moment. And if we can just stay in this moment, we'll realize, well, that's all I really have. This moment is all I really have. And what am I doing in this moment that will help me as I move forward, I think is really, really key. So I appreciate you sharing that, Emma. And I want to tap back into that again at some point before we end, to talk about the rituals that you and Harrie may have utilized in the Olympic journey, right? Were there rituals that stand out? I'm not asking you now, but I'd like to tap into that at some point before we end. So Mandy, this idea, and I know you well enough to know that you do have a regimen of visualization or meditation that you utilize. I want you to talk a little bit about that, Mandy, right? As a leader, especially as a leader that is working to destigmatize and democratize mental health in our world, in our community. Really, that's what Wondermind is focused on doing on a day-to-day basis. How do you utilize this idea of meditation in your day-to-day journey personally? And then how is Wondermind utilizing that as an organization as you move that agenda forward? Just talk a little bit about that, Mandy.
Well, I want to add, it's also very helpful for mothers that have like lots of kids, so it's very useful for many people. But yeah, I have a routine that I worked on for a while to really kind of find what worked for me and what really balanced out my day. So I wake up around 4 a.m. every day, and I get up, do a few things, make a coffee, and then I meditate, and then I write, just free write, and then I read like just anything, something that's not relevant to work. And then I try to write my intentions for the day. And then I kind of slowly go into my work mode of like, building like what's my priorities, what do I need to do. And I give myself about 4 hours a morning, and where everyone's sleeping and everybody's resting, and I'm just able to focus and get my day ready. I don't touch my phone, I don't touch my laptop, I do everything offline. And then like right around 7 or 8, I get in and start answering. At least try to answer a limit of 20 emails. And then I have my day balanced out, and I kind of know what's going to, I know what I know. I don't know what's going to come at me, but I'm so planned out that whatever comes at me doesn't really throw everything off into like, haywire, and then everything's just all messed up. So I'm a strong believer in um, definitely not touching electronics like right when you wake up. and giving yourself that time to, get connected, and meditating, even if it's 5 minutes a day or 15 minutes a day, just to take that moment to get yourself grounded. And yeah, that's what I do. And I do a little bit of that in the evening, but also at work. I will, like, halfway through the day, I will tell my chief of staff, like, I need 30 minutes, or I need an hour. And I take that time to refurbish if it's been like a really, really tough day.
So you've tapped into this idea of this pause, the power of that pause, building in those intentional moments, seconds, times that we can pause and just be still for a second. And you talked about not tapping into those electronic devices from the very beginning of our day. I think that's one of our struggles as well, is that we're addicted to this. Let's just be real. That I wake up in the morning, most of us are reaching for that phone before we even get out of bed. We're grabbing that phone to look at, hey, did I get anything that I need to tap into? And we almost have to retrain ourselves away from that. Because
some people use it as their alarm. So get an alarm so you're not touching your phone.
That's right. But this addictive idea of I need to have this phone in my hand, I just think about it. I wake up, I take the phone to the bathroom in the shower. I have it right outside the shower. So as soon as I get out, it's right there. This addictive idea that we have to have it right next to us is critically important. So I want to talk about this pause in more detail now. And when we think about pausing, one of the things, I'm a research nerd. I can't help it. My doctorate did that to me. This idea of pauses is connected to some brain research. And part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that is the mediator, is the long-term consequence. It says, if there's something that happens today, how will that impact me way down the line? It's called the prefrontal cortex. And one of the things that we do or talk to young people about, especially, is that part of the brain is not developed till about the age of 26. Well, how do we then help young people figure out ways in which to slow things down and make better decisions? And I think it's that adults oftentimes can help slow things down for other people and say, hold on, just think about this for a second. Let's, as you said, Mandy, moms and taking care of kids and dads taking care of kids, if we can slow things down for them, they'll oftentimes make better decisions. So I want to ask you all about that. Emma, I'm going to start with you. As we think about the importance of this idea of me time, I'm going to talk about this pause as having me time. How have you taken during your athletic journey, how have you taken these pauses? You had a pause for academic engagement in your journey. You had a pause after the 2016 Olympics that you re-engaged after that. So you've taken some major pauses, I would assume above and beyond smaller pauses that you've had in your life. So talk to us about how those pauses benefited you. How did it help for you to build those pauses in or take those pauses and then move on? Talk to us a little bit, Emma, about how that has been helpful for you.
Yeah, I mean, my career, for sure, without those pauses, wouldn't have ended up as long, and definitely not as successful in the end. So my first pause came when I went and did my master's degree over in Europe, and that came at a time where I'd had a couple of up and down campaigns just come off the back of the London Games, and what it made me realize was that I actually needed something else in life other than sport. And so that kind of paused then, and I guess reflection that sport wasn't the be all and end all, and I kind of immersed myself in a very different environment. Culturally, took myself away from this really high performing environment and did something different. And again, that kind of perspective and reflection allowed me to come back refreshed and ready for the next campaign. And then I guess the second pause in my career came a couple of years after that, when I didn't have the results that I wanted, and wanted to kind of free myself from the athletic life and go and get out into the big wide world. And while I was out in the big wide world, it quickly dawned on me that actually being an athlete was something really special and a really limited time in your life to be doing that. And so with that kind of change in mentality and change in mindset, I came back even more kind of with more vigor in my training and an appreciation for the day to day. And I think without having that time away and that kind of that reflection time, I certainly wouldn't have approached my last 2 Olympic cycles with the same mindset that I did. And my body probably physically would have been in a very different place as well, because you know, it's pretty brutal doing upwards of 200 kilometers in a rowing boat every week for 20 years. So just that physical pause was really important and longevity as well.
So tell me this, with those major pauses that you just spoke about, how did the people around you tune in? Were they all supportive of that pause? Were there people that are like, you can't do this right now. You can't stop doing all of this right now, Emma. How did the people around you take that? Were they supportive? Was there pushback?
My initial pause was, there was a lot of pushback from Rowing New Zealand, the organisation, because I was leaving their program and going off to do something, you know, on my own terms. So that was a bit of a shock to many people. The second one was self-inflicted, I guess. It was just, that was going to be the end of my career. So my family obviously along the way have been extremely supportive of all of my decisions. But I think it's actually in our program now being used as a bit of an example of what going away and refreshing can do. And rather than being, you know, on the red line for a whole full year cycle, in our sport we build a base of fitness and a lot of work that you can always tap back into with the right training. And so now there's a mentality. A lot of our younger kids will leave and go and study and, you know, head out and experience different things. And I think they return better people to our program ultimately at the end of the day, because they haven't just been part of this insular environment year on year.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. So Harrie, talk to us about, so we talk about a pause, that transition from major athlete, killing at championships, all of this in the BMX world. Okay, now these injuries are coming. All right, there had to be some thoughtfulness about, all right, so I want to continue to be a major athlete. I'm going to transition, which to me is like a major pause, because you had to pause, stop something, and then start something different. Tell us about that transition, how you dealt with that pause, how that ultimately ended up being helpful. Obviously, it worked out for you. Talk to us a little bit about that pause and that transition in your life.
Yeah, of course, there was a big transition, and I think it felt more like an obligated pause, like wasn't choosing for that at the moment. But when I think about pauses power, I think for me, way more recently, like the Paris Olympics, I was a lot of focused on my mental fitness during Paris, because my Olympics took 7 race days, 7 days in a row, and I was really focused on how can I be physically on my best, but also mentally. I even had like an Excel sheet where I wrote down every day what I was doing. Also wrote down the times when I would be focusing on my older opponents, like what I said about the visualization. But then also, like, I also planned like moments I didn't want to be focused on the Olympics. I wanted to take a pause and be ready for the day after. What I also did, like, take another phone number. So when I was taking that break from the sport, I also didn't want to get all the good luck messages or whatever. It's always nice to get the messages, but I really wanted to take off when I wanted to, and I saw the importance of that. So for me, during the Olympics, taking the pause, I think it helped me a lot during the Paris Olympics.
So let me follow up with that, and then I'm going to come to Mandy with this idea about the pause. So if you think back, Harrie, to the Olympics, what was the most challenging thing that you faced throughout that process? Multiple Olympics, multiple golds and medals, and all of that, everything, being in the Olympic Village, and all of these things for both of you. What was the biggest challenge that you faced during that process, Harrie?
For me, like what I said, because it was like 7 days in a row. I wanted to be on my best every day. But I need to step down afterwards. Like when I leave the track, when I go back to the hotel, I need to calm down and I need to relax. Because if I keep going in my head and keep focused on the race, like I cannot do that 7 days in a row. Yeah, so it was for me like the hardest challenge was to take the pause, but to calm down, like to relax, and also like how do I sleep after I won a gold medal? But the day after, I also want to perform again. So yeah, I think that was my hardest challenge.
I like you share with that, and I'm just going to ask Emma real quick before I go back to Mandy. So you same thing for you. This idea, because working with a lot of NBA and NFL athletes, I always talk to them. I've watched them after a game, like they can't fall asleep. They got so up for it. You have to get so up for your event, and then the event is done, and literally they couldn't sleep until they wouldn't fall asleep till 4, 5, 6 the next morning because they were so up. Emma, did you have that experience in the Olympic Games throughout your journey? You had a ton of different Olympic experiences. Did anything stand out where you were like you had to get so up and it was hard to come back down? Did you experience that at all?
Yes, certainly. I think my Tokyo final was a great example of that. As I mentioned before, I hardly slept the night before, but it was actually something that we'd prepared for because, to Harrie's point, you know what you're going into and you know how the brain works. And I knew that I'd be either nervous or excited or all of these kind of things. So it was more about having those mental strategies in place so that it didn't become a negative thing. When I eventually did wake up in the morning and I'd only slept for 3 hours, that was okay because we knew that this was going to happen and all the work had been done. And by the time you get to an Olympic Games, you're literally going through processes and going through things that you've practiced a million times over. So I think a lot of that planning and thinking about where the mind goes during a pinnacle event was really key to kind of dealing with those moments.
Yeah. That's important to hear. I love that. So, Mandy, I've heard you talk before about when we think about these pauses, even you go back to earlier what you talked about being in the midst of a lot of work and then taking a 20-day pause in the midst of it. And sometimes as human beings, there's shame connected to thinking that we should take a pause. Like I shouldn't do it. I feel so bad but we know we need it for ourselves. How do you deal with that, Mandy? Have you dealt with that? How do you work through that as you go? And how does that happen to unfold itself at Wondermind?
Yeah. Shame is something I think you have to work through. The reason why I hit the wall when I did was because I was always raised, you work, 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 work. And that's just what you do. And you do it 110%. And so needing a break was considered weak. And like, oh, why can't you keep going? They're going, they're going, they're going. So after I finally got to that point and I really hit my bottom, I realized that there is no shame after I got rested. And I remember it after I got off the plane coming home from the 25-day stay, everyone in there probably thought I was in my own world. I had on headphones, I was listening to Lil Wayne, and I was dancing through the airport like, yeah, I just did that. Like, and I feel amazing. And so um there's two energies that I really try to balance out. And one of them is is the shame of taking the break. I don't have that anymore because I see how it makes me work more efficient and it makes me a better person for my family and for my friends and for my team members. So the shame is something that I think you just have to internally work through and talk through with someone. Yeah, that one. But like another thing that would always stunt me and really bring me down and put, a lot of pressure and a lot of stress on me was anytime there was an obstacle, and like I would freeze and go, oh God, here it is. And all I would see is the madness around it. And so now I just practice that the obstacle is the way. So you just go through that, and you don't think, how do I avoid it? You think, okay, go through it, like figure it out, like go through it that way.
Yes, I love this idea of the obstacle being the way, because it connects to what we were talking about earlier as adversity, is that the obstacles are teaching us something that we must learn, whatever it is. We don't, and no one wants it. I don't want any obstacles in my life, but I've had a billion of them. And now that I can look back at those obstacles, I realize, oh, they were teaching me something. I needed to go through that because it made me a better version of myself because I went through it. Didn't
Yeah, it
want
makes
to,
you welcome them,
That's right.
instead of like,
That's right.
building that animosity or that anger that like really wears you down. You're like,
Yeah.
all right, I'm about to grow. That's what's about to happen.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So let's tie up the end of this discussion. We're talking a little bit about challenges. So I'll start with Harrie. I want you to focus and hone in on the idea of injury and rehabilitation, Harrie. You had a number of surgeries and shoulder injuries and all of these things. How did you work through that? Not just the injury and the surgery, but the rehab process because you're chomping at the bit as athletes, you're ready to go. Like, how long is this rehab going to be? And is this delaying the inevitability of my success? And I need to go and go and go. Talk to us a little bit about the challenge of not only the injury, but the rehab process and how you dealt with that area as you went through your kind of athletic journey.
The rehab of such an injury like shoulder injury is really, really hard. Like, cannot go quick enough. But yeah, it's really important to take the time and to let everything recover, because if you go too quick, it will go wrong again. It was really hard, but I think so sometimes it also was good for me to shift my focus. Like, I always was into sport, but I also did school besides it. During those rehabs, it was nice I could shift my focus a little bit, but then I'm still really sport minded, so that not really easy for me. But yeah, sometimes it was nice to have something on the side. But then looking forward, I think just keeping the dream for what success could be, and just going for that.
That's beautiful. So Emma, I want you to take us back, like kind of go in your mind's eye view back to those moments kind of before or in the midst of the 2016 Olympics in Rio, and narrowly missing out on that elusive Olympic medal, having placed fourth. How did that challenge impact you as a person? Right? All of a sudden, you've been busting your butt. You've more than once get to this fourth place. You're right at the edge of medal contention, but you don't get it. How did that impact you as a person? Hopefully positively, but in the moment, I'm sure it didn't feel good. Talk to us a little bit about that, Emma.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty tough time when you set your goals. And for me, this was the second time that I'd crossed the line in fourth place. So you can imagine the sense of deja vu as I crossed the finish line at that games, and this, realization that potentially I just would never achieve the dream that I'd set out to achieve. And I think there was a real period almost of mourning, and that it sounds terrible for a fourth place at an Olympics that I'm speaking like that, but mentally it was a huge hit to me, and there was a period where I just needed to kind of process that result and refresh and reframe and think about what was next. And I'd done that study a couple of years earlier, so I turned my attention to heading offshore and working and getting some work experience and just taking a different path in life. And again, I think that allowed me to regain the perspective, but it certainly was mentally a really tough time. When you don't achieve what you want to, of course, it's going to take some time to process.
Mhm. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. So I know that we've come to the end of our journey. And I want to thank everyone that has joined us for joining us and sharing this time with us. We really appreciate it. Um, be sure to stick around on this same link that you've joined for this panel discussion for session 4. And it's that session 4 is a mid-summit stretch. Mindful movement to re-energize yourself for the rest of the day. And be sure to subscribe to Wondermind's newsletter for more mental fitness content. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. And we look forward to continuing this engagement in these discussions as we move forward. Thanks for everyone joining us today and for our special guests. Thank you, thank you, thank you.